On the radio, you're sharing the services of the First Baptist Church in Dallas. And this is the pastor presenting one of the most dynamic and colorful evangelists in America today. He's been 13 years in evangelism. He's held over 400 revival meetings. 3 years as staff evangelist of the First Baptist Church of Little Rock, Arkansas. Former chaplain to the University of Arkansas Razorbacks, national football champions. Former high school football star of the East and West All-Star Game. Golden Gloves boxing champion at the University of Arkansas. Speaks to over 100 college and high school students every year. Former All-Intercollegiate Conference fullback for Arkansas State. He's a former Arkansas Razorback. Educated at the Arkansas State College and the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. In his last revival meetings, there have been 376 saved. The best thing is just loose him and let him go. This is Walter K. Ayers, Evangelist Ayers. God love you. Bless you, fella.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Pastor. All of my life, since I was a little bitty boy, the supreme ambition of my life was to be tough. I used to dream of being the heavyweight champion of the world. And then I got to thinking I was the heavyweight champion of the world. I had the joy of fighting Billy Ray Smith. If you remember, Billy Ray Smith plays football for the Baltimore Colts. Tremendous. Last year, he broke Joe Namath's wrist. Billy Ray Smith fought Pete Rademacher to see who would go to the Olympics. Rademacher won the Olympics and fought Floyd Patterson. I had the joy of fighting Billy Ray Smith. He hit me on the shoulder and sprung both of my ankles. I feel like I came up from nothing and brought it with me sometimes, you see. I must say tonight, in giving my testimony, that I am what I am only by the grace of God. For by grace I was saved through faith, and that not of myself. It was a gift of God, not of works, lest I should boast. I guess every story has got to have a beginning. I was born in a little sleepy town by the name of DeWitt, Arkansas. My town was so small, we couldn't have a town idiot. We had to take turns, you know. I don't recall too much about those early days. I know my family never went to church, never. We never read the Bible. We never prayed. And not one member of my family knew the Lord Jesus as personal Savior. When I was 10 years old, I understood for the first time that my home was not built upon the rock, but upon the sand. And without anybody teaching me, I can remember going out into the edge of the woods. Maybe it was superstition, but I recall getting on my knees and praying that my mother and my daddy would stay together. Before I was 11 years old, they had a violent fight. My daddy went one way, my mother went the other. I can remember as if it were yesterday. My daddy called me to a car and said, "Son, I'm going to haul out of here, and I'll never come back again." And I said to him, "You've left before, and you always come back, and you'll come back even tonight." I know a boy doesn't like to admit this, but as my daddy turned the corner, through my tears, I was still calling after him, "You'll come back even tonight." But he never did. The next day, my mother called me to a taxi and said, "Son, I'm very afraid." Her people had agreed that she could come to them and bring my little sister. And my mother told me, "I'll return and I knew she would. And I spent 91 days in this little two-room home alone, and sometimes when it would storm, I have prayed to die. But during these days, I became a real good visitor. I would always show up at the neighbor's house just at mealtime, and they would feed me, get word to my mother I was okay. My mother came home soon with determination of raising her son and my little sister. My mother took 2 jobs. She worked 8 hours a day as an aide at the local clinic, and then she worked 8 hours a day with a private patient. My mother worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 9 years until she had the stroke. She lived, but it left her partially paralyzed. With my mother working 16 hours a day, out of the heart of every day, I was my own boss. I would go to school when I would choose. I would come home as I would choose at night. And during this time, a hate entered my heart for all forms of dedication and commitment. I wish some way I could go back and undo those terrible days. By the time I was 15 years old, I had been expelled from school 4 times and told never, ever to return. I fought in the street like the animal. I stole the cars. I broke into the stores and the homes. I carried the bootleg whiskey and made the drop for the bootlegger, a crime that my daddy had served a year in state prison for. 12 times I stood before a silver-headed judge. I'll never forget the last time I stood before him. I heard that old silver-headed judge say, "Young man, I tried to help you, didn't I? But you fight like the animal. You steal. You've been before me over and over again. And I am at the end of my rope with you. I sentence you to 2 years. I stood there with a smirk on my face. I knew I was gone. My mother, only as a mother could do, started to cry. And I heard my mother take credit for all of my sins. A football coach, a wonderful man who saved my life. He put in a good word for me. And between them, I watched him break the heart of an old judge. He started to cry. A circuit judge shedding tears. And he said, "Young man, I can't send you over there over the tears of your mother. But here's what we're going to do with you. We're going to let you serve your time here or over there. You're very old now. You're almost 19 years old. If you fail to get back into school, if you get expelled one more time, if you talk back to one teacher, you just run one stop sign, and we're not going to have a court. There'll be no trial. We're going to put you in a car and take you home." Well, I'm not going to lie about it. I left there. I knew I could not stay out 2 weeks, maybe 3. Went back to school, and the principal and the superintendent said, "You've been expelled a long time now, and the police make you go to school, and you've always wanted to be a special student. So we're going to let you be a special student. You don't have to own any books. You don't have to answer the roll. You don't have to get your lessons. You just sit in the class and keep your mouth shut." So that's what I did. I was almost 19 in the 8th grade. Some of them thought I was a teacher, you know. Hey, you know that? Hey. But that football coach, a strong man, he's won more football games than any high school coach in the history of my state. He just kept dogging me. He said, lift up your head and be somebody. You don't have to walk around with low head down shame. You could be somebody. And he kept talking to me about be a champion. Be a champion. Give everything you've got. Be tough. Go all the way. And I thought in my heart one night, why, today is just like yesterday, and tomorrow will be just like today, and I have nothing to live for. And I decided in my heart, I don't care how old I am. I don't care what grade I'm in. Tomorrow, for the first time in my life, I'm going back to school, and I'm going to get my lessons. I'm going to answer the roll, and I'm going to try to make some friends and be like the other students. I didn't carry one of my books. I carried all of them. I filed into that classroom and took my seat, and as usual, the teacher called the roll. When she called my name, I said present, like to scared the whole bunch to death. You know that? And you know what? The strangest thing happened in my life. Those teachers that I thought would laugh when I'd go to state prison were the same teachers who stayed after school and gave their time freely to help me catch up. But oh, I was so far behind. They got me up to the 9th, and I thought, here I am, 19, and if I could just make a grade every time, 19, 20, 21, 2, oh, I thought I'll never make it, and I was just about ready to drop out. And I walked down by the office and looked in the window, and there was a young lady that had just moved to my town. Oh, she was sharp. She had bangs and had freckles on her face, and I thought, I'm not going to lie about it. She just rung my bell. You know what I mean? Hey, I thought, wouldn't it be something if that girl like me, everybody else my age, they had a girl. Of course, everybody my age was graduating from high school, you know, and there I was, hung down there. But I walked in there and I asked her for a date. I tried to impress her. I told her all about my honors, and she didn't know it, but the closest that Walter Ayers had ever been to honor was when I said, yes, Your Honor, and no, Your Honor, you know. Well, I asked her for a date. I thought she was going to say no, but she said yes. Like to scared me to death. I tell you, I was as shook as a piano at a Church of Christ convention, and that shook, you know that? Hey, I told somebody I was as afraid as a frog on the freeway with his hopper hung, and that shook, you know that? Well, the next day, walking home from the Freeze King, I said to her, tomorrow we go out again. No, she said, tomorrow's Sunday. And I have to go to church on Sunday, and on Wednesday, and on Friday for visitation, Sunday afternoon for choir practice. Oh, I hate myself now for it. But I just told her all. I said, hold it. Wait a minute. That church was down there before you got here. And that church will be down there after you're gone. Now let's settle this thing once and for all and forever. You make your choice. It's either me or your church. You talk about taking the wind out of somebody when you say goodbye. Hold it. I said, goodbye nothing. It's a good thing I'm in a forgiving attitude. I tell you, I like to lost my only girl on my first date. I did the best I knew how for a year to talk that girl out of going to church, and I couldn't do it. I wanted to be with her. So I decided my buddies won't be there to call me sissy. I can stand anything for an hour. I went down with her. I met her pastor right off. He pastors out here edge of town, Dixon Ryle. He's a good man, God's man. I never forget what he said. He walked up, he's just 2 years older than I am. He was in college, not in high school, you know. He walked up and said, Walter K., I've heard a lot about you. Said, are you a Christian? I turned red in the face and I looked down and I said, preacher, I don't talk to you about that sissy stuff. I'm a football player. I talk to you about football. All right, he said. I said, better still, in the off season, on Saturday, we choose up here in town. We have a little game. It gets kind of tough. Why don't you come down some Saturday and play with us? He said, I'll be down there next Saturday. I thought if you do, I'm not going to break one of your legs. I'm going to break both of them for embarrassing me in front of my girl. You could have never made me believe that preacher would show up, but he did. I chose some fellas, and he chose some fellas. And you men who know football, you know what I mean when I say, I kicked that football off, and that preacher backed up to retrieve that ball. And fellas, I was running wide open and got him zeroed in and left the ground for contact. And some way, that preacher stepped sideways, and I hit right on my nose, and he went 85 yards for a touchdown. Oh, I thought, that can't be true. That day, that preacher that I thought was a sissy turned me every way but loose. We became friends. You can't beat them, join them. Hey, you know that? I went to hear him preach every Sunday. Nobody had bothered to tell me that he'd already made All-State playing football at McGee, Arkansas. I don't know where the FCA was in that time. We never had any Paul Andersons come to my town. I just thought all Christians were sissies. I thought the church was for the old and for the weak and for the sissies. I went to hear him preach every Sunday. One Sunday it seemed that he was preaching just to me. You know what he said? He said, had I been the only sinner on the face of the earth, that Jesus would have still left heaven's glory for earth's gloom and died just for me. And I said in my heart, I don't care what the boys say. They can call me a sissy. They can laugh at me and they can make fun of me. I don't care. I too want to be saved. And I turned loose that seat and I took a step and I was running. And like a little child, I got on my knees before that preacher. And I gave the preacher my hand. And I gave God my heart. And I've never been sorry. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Since Jesus took my sins away. He taught me how to watch and pray. Oh, happy day. Since Jesus took my sins away. I'd love to tell you what I think of Jesus. Since in him I found a friend so strong and true. I could tell you how he's changed my life completely. He did something no other friend could do. But if I had 1,000 lives, and every life 1,000 heads, and every head 1,000 tongues, and every tongue 1,000 ears, I could never share with you how good God has been to me. Helped me finish high school in 3 years. When I got through from high school, just like that coach said, they had that football scholarship to the University of Arkansas. They paid everything. Free meals. I lived in a mansion up there with those boys. Had a tutor for every class. God knows I needed one, you know that. I tell you know that young lady? That young lady? God gave her to me to be my wife. To our love, he's given us a little boy, named him after that preacher and that coach. A little girl named Angel. A little girl named Melody. I got married in high school. I don't recommend that your children get married in high school. I was 40-something years old, you know. I was an old man, you know. I went to university and they said to me, you're always giving testimony Go down to the First Baptist Church. They have the famous evangelist Angel Martinez. I went down to hear him. I weighed 212 pounds. I had never worn a tie in my life. I'm still not sold on them. I don't like it. I have brothers who have never worn a tie. I went to church, a pair of Levi's, little half-white tennis shoes, and a T-shirt, and they shave your hair as a freshman at the university as an musician. I walked in that church and looked up on the platform, and there stood Angel Martinez. He had on a pink suit. Everybody told me he made good grades in college and seminary, and I thought, well, he might be good on memorizing, but when God handed out the brains what to wear, he must have been behind the door somewhere, you know. But you know what? I wish I could put it in a better fashion. But as Angel Martinez preached, I felt the tug on my heart, an impression that I was to preach. Oh, I said, I can't preach. I stutter and I stammer and I talk too fast and nobody can understand me. But he said, whatever God calls you to do, he's going to help you. And so I thought I was going to be a coach. I trained 5 years and 2 summers to be a coach. But I turned loose that seat and I walked down the aisle in that First Baptist Church, Fayetteville, Arkansas. The pastor, Dr. Hall, was dealing with somebody, and I walked up to the platform, T-shirt, 212 pounds, Levi's and tennis shoes, and I stuck out my hand to Mr. Martinez, and I said, Mr. Martinez, the Lord has called me to preach too. I'll never forget what he said. He looked at me and he said, always look sharp. I thought I looked sharp. I didn't know, you know what? Well, soon school was out, and I went home, and I thought I made a mistake. And friends said, yes, you made a mistake. God has called you to be faithful. But you know, I couldn't keep from preaching. I'd hem somebody up, one person, tell him all I knew. Didn't take long, but I did the best I knew how. In the summertime, to make money, I would buy fish from the fishermen on the river and go from football fan to football fan selling the fish. I had an old stripped-down car with a Coke box bolted on the back of it. I put the fish in the box, and I'd go around selling fish. Now, this old car didn't have a top, didn't have any doors, no windows, no fenders, no windshield, just me and the motor, that's all. I had an old boy that helped me sell fish. His name was David Burks, had real big eyes. He was real short. And I said to him, David, did you know the Lord has called me to preach? Yes, he said, what else is new? No. I said, David, I tell you the truth, God has called me to preach, and every preacher has got to have a singer. Angel Martinez had a great singer. Billy Graham has got a great singer. And David, you are going to be my singer. He belonged to the Lutheran Church. Brother, his eyes really got big. I always love the gestures that preachers use. You ever notice some will make a point like this and some close their eyes? I like them all. David and I, my pastor came over the seminary at Fort Worth, and my church didn't have a pastor, and they wouldn't let me preach. But I'd come to the empty church in the morning. I made old David get a song down, first, last verse, and I would stand up behind the sacred desk, nobody there, just me and David, and I'd preach, I'd close my eyes, I'd wave my arms, and I'd watch that clock, and friend, I could make the hand go all the way around every time. Well, I didn't know how to get a place to preach. I'd been turned down all over the county. But I knew the First Baptist Church, Gillette, Arkansas, didn't have a pastor. 10 minutes away, one of my customers, Mrs. Swain, she was over WMS in that church, and so I called her up and I said, Miss Swain, the Lord has called me to preach, and I have my own singer. I know y'all don't have a preacher, It's getting late in the week. It's Tuesday. And don't y'all worry about a thing. I'm going to come down Sunday and take the service. She asked me to repeat it. And I did. And she said, well, son, the men, the deacons take care of that. And they got a man coming from the Baptist headquarters. Oh, I said, you don't mean to tell me you got a man driving 100 miles one way, and I got a good sermon David said best he ever heard. Let me come down and preach. And she said, son, sometimes. Well, I thanked her best I knew how and hung up the phone and said, Dave, we're washed up. That's it. Don't try to forget it again. The next day was Wednesday. Business meeting in the First Church Gillette. And strangely, that deacon had to stand and announce that the man from the headquarters had to cancel. And when he did, this wonderful lady jumped to her feet and told of my request. After about a 30-minute debate, they finally agreed I could come and preach. I didn't have a phone in my home, and so they told Miss Swain to get word to me to pick up David, come on down and preach. Well, her nephew worked on the police force. She called the policeman and told him, come out and tell me, pick up David, come on down to preach. Well, I'm sitting in my front room minding my own business. And the big police car pulled up and stopped. He opened the front door and I went out the back door. I tell you, I thought they were after me again. Well, when they got word to me I was supposed to preach, I found David. I said, David, my coach was never half prepared. Not one of them. Coach Broads, Coach Cook, not one of them. My preacher was never half prepared. We got to plan and we got to practice and we got to work. And we went to that church in the morning, went to the church at noon, and went to church at night. And every time to the second, to the minute, I could make that clock go all the way around. I could make that sermon last 1 hour. Well, I knew I was going to have to dress up. I didn't own a suit. I have brothers right now that have never worn a tie in their lives. They make fun of me, call it the choker and a bunch of things. I went to David's. David had 3 suits. He had a blue suit. He had a black suit. And he had a beautiful tuxedo. It had those stripes down the leg. And that thing you tie around you, and that velvet. And I remembered what that evangelist said. Always look sharp. He was so short, I couldn't wear his clothes. But I thought, David, if I had me a suit like that, you put yours on, I put mine on, we be the sharpest folks Gillette has ever laid eyes on. And friends, we got on my stripped-down car, went to North Little Rock an hour away, and I walked into the pawn shop at the foot of the bridge. I didn't rent a tuxedo, I bought one. Hey, $9. I had it patched here on the side a little. I had it pressed and clean. Oh, that thing had big stripes down the legs. That velvet. Mine was better than David's. I had the claw handles here in the back, you see, of mine. A lot of times people at this point, they say, well, he's just jesting. Oh, I wish I were just jesting. You have a preacher in your church, Bill Shaw. He remembers every bit of it. I didn't wear that suit one time. I wore that tuxedo 1 year. I saw preachers looking at me and, look at me. I thought they were jealous of my suit. I didn't know, I put my tuxedo on, and David put his tuxedo on, and we got on my strip down and went down to preach. somebody said later, looked like Heckle and Jekyll had come to town, you know. Hey, you know that? Well, on the way down, I said, now, David, you know my sermon, it lasts 1 hour. And so, David, you stand and lead the first last verse of the song and sit down, and I'll stand and preach my hour sermon and let them out right at 12 o'clock. Well, friends, just like clockwork, the service started 15 until 11. They made their announcements. They gave the Sunday school report. They had their prayer, and they introduced old David and Walter Kay. David, like a pro, stood in his First Baptist service and led the first and last verse of the song and was seated. I stood to preach. The big clock said 4 minutes until 11. 4 extra minutes. I made a little talk. Good job for David. Glad to be here. And I got down to preaching. I closed my eyes. I waved my arms. And I looked at that clock, and the hand had moved about that much. I went back over the sermon again. And friends, at the end of a long invitation, it was 5 minutes after 11. I thought, Lord, if you'd let me get out of here, I'd never try it again. It always looked so easy when my preacher just stood up. And that large lady standing back there looked at the clock, and I can hear it haunts me. She said, well, we never did get out this early before. You know what? Those deacons, they came down the aisle and put their arms around me and said, now, son, don't let this defeat you. We're going to pray for you this afternoon. Come on back and preach that sermon again. We had a great service that night. 5 people came to Jesus. Can you imagine? 5 people saved the first day I ever preached. 2 of them are still saved. You know, I guess I won the other 3. I don't, hey, I believe every Baptist ought to be saved at least one time, don't you? I want to be a coach. I trained to be a coach. But if the Lord would speak to my heart tonight and say, Walter Kay, when you were very young, you wanted to coach like your coach. But I have called you to preach, and now because you have preached, I multiply your life to 1,000 lives. Go on and preach this life away from me. And then you'll be a football coach 1,000 times over with my blessing. If I know my heart, I would not hesitate a moment to say, Lord, if thou wilt, let me preach Christ and him crucified with the remaining 1,000 lives. I had walked life's way with an easy tread, had followed where comforts and pleasures led, until one day in a quiet place, I met my master face to face. I met him and knew him and blushed to see that his eyes full of sorrow were fixed on me. I faltered and fell at his feet that day. My castles melted and vanished away. My thought is now for the souls of men. I've lost my life to find it again. E'er since one day in a quiet place, I met my master face to face. Have you met him? Have you given your heart to him? You say, preacher, I want something real. You can have it. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. Him that cometh to me, I will in no wise cast out. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. If you will take one step to Jesus, Jesus will take 2 steps to you. If you're here tonight without him, why not bow your head and say, Lord, I will. That's all the equipment you need. I will, Lord. Come into my heart, Lord, and save me, Lord. Remember me, Lord. I'll live for you. I'll never be ashamed of you. And if necessary, I'll die for you. Will you do that? I believe you will. Would you stand quietly and reverently, everyone, everywhere? The choir's going to lead us. Our wonderful pastor, God's man, Dr. Criswell, will stand right here at the front. He's going to meet you and greet you. If you ought to move your membership. No, if you ought to move your life into this church, they'll get you a letter. You come tonight. Somebody, you. You come for baptism, to trust Jesus, to move a letter, to turn the old page and start a new chapter in your life. Come. As the choir sings, you come. And reverently. Do that. To move your letter, to give your heart to Jesus. For baptism, how about it, friend?